Good evening, I'm Leland Vittert. Those images are intense, so a warning, but we think that the images you're about to see are important. These are pictures from CNN and the LA Times showing the Taliban whipping people in the streets. Those women and children's only crime was trying to get to the airport to escape the terrorist Taliban regime. Today, our government basically admitted the lives of 10,000 Americans rest in the hands of the Taliban and in their goodwill. Let us quote for you a minute the State Department email to Americans in Afghanistan. Quote, please make your way to Hamid Karzai International Airport, and in bold letters, please be advised that the United States government cannot guarantee your security as you make that trip. Terrifying in so many words. Ordinarily, at a time like this, we would play you a soundbite from the President of the United States reassuring us all.
God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
Instead, at his only public appearance today, he gave a 20-minute speech about COVID booster shots and walked off to shouted questions from the press corps. Later on, we will tell you what he said in a pre-taped, edited interview that will air tomorrow. Here's a hint. He has no regrets and doesn't think things could have been handled any better. Let that sink in as we report about what's happening in Afghanistan over the next 20 minutes. We're going to get to what options might still exist to get Americans out, along with all the major military and political implications in a minute. But first, some more pictures from me for you. Those trying to escape face unthinkable violence by the Taliban as Taliban thugs beat those on the way to the airport. Clarissa Ward of CNN captured these pictures of the Taliban whipping people. Their only crime was trying to get out. Holly McKay is an independent journalist reporting from Afghanistan, and as always, we appreciate you being with us, Holly. You ventured out today, as I understand it, and the Taliban is in complete control?
Yes, the Taliban is in complete control. They control every checkpoint. They're presiding over every store, and they're definitely on this very bizarre PR blitz, Leland, where they're trying to soften their image somewhat, and they're trying to send a message to the outside world that they aren't the same Taliban that existed in 2001. And it's just been interesting to see the extent to which they're going to make me and to make other people that have been in the city feel, I guess, comfortable, so to speak. And I know that as a foreigner, they might be quite nice to me, but I understand a lot of my Afghans, they won't experience that kind of hospitality, especially when the United States leaves.
I never thought I'd hear the words hospitality and Taliban in the same sentence. I understand you went out and interviewed some members of the Taliban. We have some pictures that you posted on Instagram available. Tell us what they were saying to you.
So it was kind of a bit of a dichotomy. It's been a wild few hours. We actually had to rely on the Taliban to escort us safely through a lot of checkpoints so that I could get to the Uzbek border, because, as you can see, it's increasingly difficult to get back to Kabul or to kind of find another route out of the country. So this has really been my only option. But in terms of talking to the Taliban, the older Taliban leaders that I talked to, the commanders, they were very quick to sort of tell me that what they wanted was a Sharia law. And when I sort of pressed, well, what does that mean? They would say, well, if you murder someone, you get murdered. If you steal, you have your hand chopped off. Women should be completely covered in a burqa. So they were sort of reciting laws that did exist 20 years ago, that at the same breath, they were also trying to say that they weren't the same Taliban. And I think they're just trying to say that they're smooth takeovers, and the fact that there wasn't a lot of violence when they came in is far different to what happened back in the 90s. So it's utterly bizarre, if I can describe it in any way. And then the younger Taliban members that I spoke to, they were a lot more they just wanted to be on their phones. They wanted to be on Instagram. They wanted to chat with their friends. A lot of them were picking up army uniforms that had been dumped by the military and getting rid of the insignia and wearing them around themselves and just kind of joking around. It was just this crazy to me to sort of think that these people were now running a country, or, it's just mind-blowing. But having said that, they all have gone out of their way to be especially nice and courteous to me.
Where do you think that comes from? It seems organized in one sense to be nice and courteous to you. So they've got that part of the PR blitz down. But then we look at these pictures out of Kabul and out of other parts of the country where they're beating people and they're shooting at people. And we've heard reports of other atrocities, of people being paraded down the streets with nooses and summarily executed, and threats being given to former American translators that if you don't get out, we're going to burn you alive. Another former translator who was burned alive. How do you square those two things?
I think it's really hard to, I guess, for the organization. It's such a big organization, and there just seems to be, the numbers are mind-blowing. They're just, everywhere you go, there are so many. But I think it's hard to really put a thumb over that many people. And I think even if sort of some of the top brass wanted to change their image and soften their image for the international community, it's very hard. You're going to have rogue elements regardless. And I think that the Taliban you see in certain places might be advocating a softer image, and then in other places, you've got elements that are ready to impose their law right here, right now. And my fear is that we are going to see a lot more of the heavy-handedness, especially as the U.S. leaves. I mean, if we're seeing this now, I can only imagine what we're going to be seeing next week and the week after that. And my heart is really with the Afghans.
Already, the American State Department is saying that people aren't being allowed through the checkpoints towards the airport. We have some video that we want to show you, and I don't know if you can see it, but it's of counter-Taliban protests in a couple of cities with them waving Afghan flags, the old Afghan flag, tearing down the Taliban flag. I have to imagine the people who are doing that are putting their lives at risk. What's the Taliban going to try to do to these folks?
Yeah, that is the fear. My guess is that while the situation is still headline news and the U.S. still does have a footprint there, they will be a little bit more tame. But you know, I have a very close friend of mine who's a big women's rights activist, and she's already told me that she's plans to go out and she's not going to be wearing the burqa. And my heart is with her, because I can only imagine what she's going to have to deal with down the track. And I can't imagine that they're going to treat that too kindly. So we just have to kind of wait and see what happens. And that's the really sad bit, is that we no longer have any kind of influence to try to protect people that are fighting for their rights.
Well, Holly, your reporting has been nothing short of remarkable. Our thanks to you, and I know some photographers you're with and your local crew and fixers who always make what we do out there possible. Our thanks to you and them, and we'll check back in with you tomorrow if that's all right.
Thank you.
All right, talk to you soon. To understand how much things have changed for the worse in the past 48 hours, we need to remind you what the National Security Advisor of the United States said just 48 hours ago.
The Taliban have informed us that they are prepared to provide the safe passage of civilians to the airport, and we intend to hold them to that commitment.
In a shocking and truly unpredictable turn of events, the Taliban has broken its word. Here is the Deputy Secretary of State, Wendy Sherman, today.
We have seen reports that the Taliban, contrary to their public statements and their commitments to our government, are blocking Afghans who wish to leave the country from reaching the airport. We will hold the Taliban accountable to the commitments they made in the 2020 agreement.
Clearly, the Taliban is terrified of being held accountable. Just a few minutes later, the defense secretary laid bare how limited the Pentagon's options really are.
And I would draw a distinction, Barr, between extracting someone in an in extremis condition or circumstance versus going out and collecting up large numbers of American citizens.
Do you have the capability to go out and collect Americans?
We don't have the capability to go out and collect up large numbers of people.
Joining me now, Republican Congressman Mark Greene sits on the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee. He's also a West Point graduate who served as a flight surgeon in both Iraq and Afghanistan with U.S. Special Forces. And has been to both of these battlefields, clearly. Good to see you, Congressman, as always. Not to quote the Marines to a soldier, but they have a term, FUBAR. Does that apply here?
Yeah, I would suggest that it does. Leland, thanks for having me on the show. I mean, the words from the secretary there are appalling, and every American should be disgusted at that. The idea that we're going to leave Americans stranded. You know, we live by the code, leave no man behind, leave no person behind. And I served with Lloyd Austin in the 82nd Airborne Division. When he was a battalion commander, I was a rifle company commander in a sister battalion. He knows the code, and they better get their act together and get those Americans out of there.
This is what President Biden had to say in an interview. We don't know what came first, the press conference or the interview. They may have been happening at the same time, but this is President Biden on the issue of Americans being left behind. Take a listen.
We'll determine at the time who's left.
And
if there are American forces, if there's American citizens left, we're going to stay till we get them all out.
Give me a second. Now we're going to listen to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley. Here you go.
Those words suggest very clearly in the military realm, you would go get people.
Well, that would be a policy decision, and if directed, we have capabilities that can execute whatever we're directed.
Politicians make policy decisions. Did you hear enough of a Sherman-esque statement from President Biden in that soundbite?
Well, what I heard was we're going to get them. We'll stay long enough to get them. But then you listen to the soldiers and the leadership of the Department of Defense basically saying, you know, we don't have the capability. You hear the general saying, well, that's a policy decision. And that's him basically saying, I'm waiting on the president to give me the order. So, Mr. President, give the order. Let's go get every American. It's appalling that there's even a suggestion we wouldn't.
It's sort of this bizarre situation where the United States has 6,000 soldiers at Kabul airport. They're not really guests of the Taliban, but they're vastly outnumbered and they're surrounded. That's a pretty impossible situation for our troops to be in, isn't it?
I mean, it is, but what's unfortunate, and again, this is just a reflective of the terrible planning that was done to get this withdrawal done, they're collapsed into one perimeter. I mean, why didn't we keep Bagram open and have 2 locations that we could fly people out of and spread the Taliban enemy thin? You know, I mean, this isn't a question that should even be asked. These are Americans, thousands of them, stranded outside a perimeter. Go get them. Get them there. And I don't care about the deal made with the Taliban. Let's get Americans home.
And well, certainly the Taliban's already broken their deal, which comes as a complete surprise to all of us.
Absolutely.
This was from the Wall Street Journal. Credit where credit's due to Bill McGurn for writing this. Afghanistan reveals all the president's weaknesses. Biden says Kabul isn't another Saigon. It may be more similar to Tehran in 1979. So far, the Taliban hasn't made any explicit demands to let those 10,000 Americans out. But for lack of a better term, the Taliban seems to have the president between a rock and a hard spot, doesn't he?
Well, there's no doubt that they have the leverage. I mean, they have our forces surrounded, essentially, in a single perimeter. It's the only pathway in and out of the country. They basically collapsed the country within just a few days. Their capability is far beyond what I think we believed it was. That issue has to be researched and oversighted. But yeah, I mean, they have all the leverage. And this notion that there somehow is a Taliban 2.0 that, you know, UNICEF reported they killed 27 children brutally in the attack to take, you know, the country. So these are horrible people. They're sadistic. They exist by this ideology that abuses, rapes women. Making a deal with them to protect Americans is absurd. It's shameful.
Well, we made it. Now we'll have to live with it and see how it goes. And your former colleagues in uniform are going to have to live by it, or at least try to deal with the consequences of it. Congressman, good to see you, sir.
Thanks, Leland. Have a good day.
You too. Well, back in the day as a foreign correspondent, I spent a lot of time with the jihadis who were seeking political legitimacy in Libya and Egypt and learned a valuable lesson. What they say is meaningless. What they do speaks volumes. We heard that earlier from Holly McKay as well. Keep that in mind as the Taliban spokesperson tells us Taliban 2.0 is going to be all warm and fuzzy, complete with women's rights and respect for everybody. You might remember when Egypt elected themselves a member of the Muslim Brotherhood as president, he promised to continue counterterrorism cooperation and keep the bad guys in jail, along with his country's alliance with Israel. Within a year, Egypt became the planning grounds for the attack against our consulate in Benghazi, where terrorists killed 4 Americans. Same night, our embassy in Cairo was almost overrun, and Morsi released known terrorists by the hundreds. Within a year, Egypt became the planning ground for the attack against our consulate in Benghazi, where, as you just heard, 4 Americans were killed that same night. Our embassy in Cairo was almost overrun. Now we'll move on to Libya. Another example. Iran with the rebels from the very beginning. And in an interview, they promised a liberal American democracy. Many of those rebels are in power now. Libya is a failed state, a haven for terrorists and home to one of the largest slave markets in the world. The Taliban has broken its word a lot quicker. Their moderation lasted somewhere around 24 hours. Harrowing images show barbaric Taliban actions. In the words of the New York Post, they are clearly not the teddy bears they claim to be. They promise no reprisals and are beating people in the streets there. They promised women would be able to work. They banned them from state TV. You can see on one side of your screen the old anchor of state TV, on the other side, the new anchor. The Taliban promised safe passage for Americans and Afghans trying to flee the country. Here are pictures reportedly of an Afghan shot by the Taliban trying to get to the airport. The list goes on and on. So while the Taliban 2.0 appears to be just as brutal, unlike the Taliban of the 1990s, they have access to the world's most advanced weapon systems that have been supplied by the United States.
So you don't think this could have been handled, this actually could have been handled better in any way? No mistakes?
No, I don't think it could have been handled in a way that we're going to go back in hindsight and look, but the idea that somehow there's a way to have gotten out without chaos ensuing, I don't know how that happens. I don't know how that happened.
So for you, that was always priced into the decision?
Yes.
Talking points have changed, haven't they? A defiant President Biden in his first interview since Afghanistan's collapse, defending his handling of America's withdrawal, saying he saw no way for the U.S. to leave without sparking chaos, and expressing no regrets over the enormous consequences. Joining us now, former intelligence officials who have worked on both sides of the aisle. Dave Schanzer worked with congressional Democrats on Homeland Security committees, including helping with legislation for then-Senator Joe Biden. Nathan Sales served as the ambassador at large and coordinator for counterterrorism under President Trump. Gentlemen, appreciate you both being with us. Dave, go back to your time working with Joe Biden. Would you have advised him to give that answer to that question?
Well, that was a long time ago. It was 20 years ago when I worked for him. Did work on Homeland Security a lot more more recently. Listen, I think the intelligence that was provided during the Obama administration, during the Trump administration, then with Biden, is that if we were to withdraw, the Taliban was going to eventually take over. And the timing of that, of course, were they going to last 6 months? Were they going to last a year?
Dave, pardon me. It just wasn't the question I asked. It's an answer to a question, just not the question I asked. The question is, should he have said he had regrets, and should he have said we could have done this better? Or do you agree with him that there was just no other way to do it, and we did the best we could, and hindsight's 2020?
Listen, I don't know the answer to the question whether there was logistically a better way. Obviously, everybody would have liked to have avoided the chaos. The point I'm trying to make is that if we were to withdraw, we can argue about the question about whether withdrawal was a good idea, but that was a Trump policy and that was eventually the Biden policy. The Taliban was going to take over, and all of these scenes that you've shown over the last half hour were going to occur on somebody's watch. The Afghan Air Force and the Army were going to lose, and those weapons that we provided them over decades were going to turn over to the enemy's hands. Of course, we should have gotten our people out more quickly and earlier. But if we had closed the embassy, let's say, in July, the government might have melted away even more quickly, and there still would have been chaos. So
people are saying that the decision to close Bagram as well sort of indicated to the Afghans that we were cutting and running, and does that. Ambassador Sales, I want to bring you into this conversation because this was essentially President Trump's deal, according to the Biden administration. Is that a fair critique?
Hey, Leland, thanks for having me on. No, I don't think that's fair at all. There's an important difference between the Trump administration's approach and the one we're seeing the Biden administration pursue today. Under the Trump administration, the United States made a deal to leave Afghanistan if and only if the Taliban kept their end of the bargain. And that meant the Taliban had to break with al-Qaeda. They've never broken with al-Qaeda. Taliban also promised that they would negotiate in good faith with the Afghan government. Again, the Taliban broke their word. Stop me if you've heard this story before.
But is perhaps making a deal with terrorists who are known to break their word the fault of the person who's making the deal, not the fault of the person who keeps breaking their word? Shame on us for being fooled twice?
Well, I think the Trump administration's approach to Afghanistan wasn't perfect by any stretch, but it's a heck of a lot better than this. We didn't have to. If I could finish the thought, we didn't have to go through with a withdrawal that was conditioned upon Taliban promises after the Taliban broke those promises. Once the Taliban voided the deal, there's no obligation for the United States.
Hold on, gentlemen, hold on one second. Gentlemen, stop. In fairness, the Biden administration's backed out of a number of deals or lack of deals or policy changes that the Trump administration did. This seems to be the one they kept. Dave, here's the president again, then we'll get your thoughts on the other side.
We've all seen the pictures. We've seen those hundreds of people packed into a C-17. We've seen Afghans falling.
That was 4 days ago, 5 days ago.
What did you think when you first saw those pictures?
What I thought was we have to gain control of this. We have to move this more quickly. We have to move in a way in which we can take control of that airport. And we did.
For what it was worth, it was 48 hours ago, not 4 or 5 days ago. But either way, Dave, as you think about this, you go through the talking points of the administration. I wrote some of them down, which was first they were prepared, everything was going to be fine, there wasn't going to be chaos. Then it was an intel failure. Then we trusted the Taliban. Then it was all Trump's fault. Then they knew all along that it would be chaos. And we heard that from you just now. So I'm wondering, which one is the best one to go with?
Well, Leland, let me make this point. The president said multiple times in his July 8th discussion that he didn't trust the Taliban at all. And there's no reason that he should have, because over the course of, since the agreement was made in February, as the ambassador rightly pointed out, the Taliban didn't abide by any of the terms of the deal. They didn't extricate al-Qaeda from their ranks. They didn't engage in negotiation. They didn't even start negotiation until December. And what happened? Trump rewarded them with a reduction of troop levels to 4,500 right before the election, and then went down to 2,500, even though they were violating all the terms of the deal, and the Taliban were gaining strength and taking over territory. So the situation was a very dire one. I believe, certainly, that logistically, timing-wise, in retrospect, clearly, people
I think what I'm hearing from both of you guys is you both agree. You guys, gentlemen, I really apologize. We got to run, but I think what I'm hearing from both of you guys is that America does not come off at its best over the past couple of days. Was the images we've seen. Professor, Ambassador, good to talk to you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leland.
Up next. She is the first female vice president in American history. So why have we yet to hear from Kamala Harris on the brutal reality facing millions of Afghan women and children right now? That question with an expert from Capitol Hill. And follow me on social media, TikTok, Instagram, whatever the kids are doing these days, I'm there at Leland Vittert. Well, President Biden's own party is nowhere to be found as he's coming under withering fire from both sides of the aisle for the handling of the U.S. troop withdrawal in Afghanistan. And the American public isn't happy about it either. According to a poll by 538, the president's approval rating has for the first time fallen below 50% in the wake of the Afghanistan crisis. 49.8 to 44 disapprove of how he is running the country. And one can imagine that as the images from Afghanistan soak in, things could get even worse. The latest poll numbers come as members of his own party now vow to investigate the U.S. troop withdrawal from Afghanistan and the intelligence surrounding it, including Senator Bob Menendez, chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, as well as Senators Jack Reed and Mark Warner, who chair the Senate Armed Services and Intelligence Committees. Joining us now, Steph Knight, political reporter for Axios. Steph, always good to see you. We appreciate the time and your hard work. This is the headline that caught our attention. Senate Dems vow to investigate flawed U.S. troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. Flawed in quotation marks there. You think about Warner, Menendez, and Reed. These are old friends of then Senator Joe Biden. Are Democrats turning on the president?
I mean, I think you see what happened. You look at the images and the videos that came out over the weekend, on Sunday and Monday, and these Democrats saw it too. And they know that they have to respond. And I don't think anyone looks at that and says this was perfectly executed. And so I think we're seeing that response. And we're seeing that this is an issue that they are willing to criticize the president over, despite them typically supporting the president. And we need to see where this goes. These are big deal vows that they're going to look into this, they're going to investigate. And I think, you are seeing some of them put at least some of the blame on President Trump as well.
Yeah,
they're
for sure.
at least admitting that it's both Biden and Trump's fault that this has played out the way that it has.
Yeah, unusual for this to happen, for a president's own party to say that they're going to investigate the president's actions and what happened. Do we have any idea what this investigation looks like? In January 6th, we were going to have a 9/11 style commission. Do we have a Afghanistan withdraw 9/11 style commission?
I mean, I think it's a little bit too early for us to tell exactly what this is going to look like, but based on my conversations with members on the Hill, Democrats on the Hill, and given the statements we've seen, I think they're going to take this very seriously. This was a 20-year war, and we're watching it fall apart on live TV in some cases, and so I think we're going to see this taken pretty seriously. What specifically that looks like, I'm not sure at the moment, but I don't think there's any concern that this won't be thoroughly looked at.
Aside from paper statements, you don't really see any Democrats coming out and defending the administration. We've tried to book dozens on our shows, and everybody seems to be on vacation or with their grandkids or whatever it is. If there was a victory lap to be taken on infrastructure, they'd all be lining up to be on TV. Are you seeing the same thing?
In my conversations with people, I have heard some people kind of come to the Biden administration's defense and pointing to the situation that was in place through the Trump administration, saying, giving credit to the Biden administration, saying, they had a tough situation, especially when you look at what's happening with the people trying to leave with our allies in Afghanistan, trying to get special immigrant visas. I've heard some people, say that this is a situation that was not great under Trump, and now the Biden administration is doing the best they can. But beyond that, I think you're right. There hasn't been any strong, loud support of President Biden so far.
Yeah, none that we've been able to hear. Sort of switching gears a little bit in terms of the messaging that's coming from the Biden administration. This is Wendy Sherman, Deputy Secretary of State. Take a listen.
The United States and the international community will be vigilant in monitoring how any future government in Afghanistan ensures the rights and freedoms that women and girls in that country have come to expect. In the last 20 years, Afghan women and girls have embraced their freedom.
Wouldn't those statements be a lot more powerful coming from the first female vice president than from some random underling at state?
I think it depends on who's listening, right? Who is listening to that. And I think we need to give them time. We'll see whether Vice President Kamala Harris comes out and speaks on this. Again, this is all unfolding very quickly. And so I don't think we have fully seen how the administration plans to handle this. We have heard the president himself speak out on this on multiple occasions now. So, would it be powerful? Of course, whenever the Vice President of the United States speaks, it is powerful, and we'll have to see whether that's something she decides to do.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, though, because so often in the photo ops with President Biden, especially around COVID, you saw the vice president standing behind him, especially when there was good news. We didn't see her yesterday during the president's brief remarks on Afghanistan, didn't see her today during the president's remarks on COVID. Any reporting on where she is or why she seems to be so detached from the crisis right now?
I don't have any direct reporting on why she hasn't been present, but of course have reported on her role on other issues as well, including voting rights and immigration. So I'm sure she is already busy as it is. Yeah. But again, I think we'll have to wait and see if this is something that she also comes out and speaks about.
It'll be interesting. You've done a lot of great, and one of the reasons we wanted to have you on, Steph, was because you've done so much reporting on the vice president's office. There is this sort of uncomfortable divide, and Mike Allen of Axios as well had great reporting on this, between the president's office and the vice president's office. The vice president famously said that she was the last person in the room when the decision was finally made to withdraw from Afghanistan on August 31st. She owned that back in April and made news about that. Are you hearing anything from her office of how they're trying to distance themselves?
I haven't heard anything specifically about them trying to distance themselves, but again, like we'll see what happens if she decides to come out and speak to this. If this is something that they feel that she can then wait to, but it does, this certainly isn't something the administration is trying to put away or pretend isn't happening. They have put the people who are most directly involved on this issue, the Secretary of State, leaders in the State Department and Department of Defense have spoken on it repeatedly, and the president himself has come out and spoken on this. So, I think accusations that they're trying to sweep this under the rug is probably not accurate, but I think it's an interesting point whether the vice president will also choose to speak to this.
I think all of us reporters would have enjoyed if he had taken questions after his speech today. That was surprising.
Of
fair?
course.
Yeah, fair.
We always want to ask questions.
There we go. Steph Kite of Axios, good talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Up next, taking a look at how the social media giants are treating the Taliban as they try to get their new, friendlier Taliban 2.0 version out. All right, now that the Taliban has control of a country the size of Texas with a population that's on par with California, also located right next to China, the propaganda from the Taliban is coming out fast and furious. We've talked about that throughout the show. The Taliban 2.0. Government, and especially bad governments, love to use social media. Fox News is outraged that President Trump is banned from Twitter, while the Taliban still has an account. And others love the idea of this kinder, gentler Taliban because its Twitter feed talks about respecting free speech and respecting women and the like. Morgan Wright was a senior advisor at the State Department's Anti-Terror Division and assistance program dealing with social media companies, and the same kind of propaganda the Taliban is putting out right now. Mr. Wright, is there anything they can do about this, these social media companies, or do you kind of have to just let the Taliban be the Taliban?
They can ban them. Look, the Taliban was declared a terrorist organization by the State Department on September 1st, 2010. I mean, we're coming up on 11 years, the 11th year anniversary of them being designated as a terrorist organization, and yet they're allowed to exist on social media where it's very clear that there is nothing peaceful about the Taliban. I used to instruct in Pakistan, which was actually the father of the Taliban, the ISI. These folks are nothing but brutal. They might, and here's the purpose of propaganda, Leland. They're telling the rest of the world they respect women, they respect women's rights. They never did the first time, they won't the second time. But yet with social media, what they can do now that they couldn't do in 2000 is manage the message better, be able to control the narrative better, be able to put out a facade that says, hey, we're a kinder, gentler Taliban. We're not the same ones. We only behead people with a clean knife, not a dirty one. So, these guys, the Taliban are nothing but a terrorist, brutal organization, period. They should have never been allowed to be on a social media platform.
It seems as though Twitter is allowing them, saying so long as they don't advocate violence on their Twitter account, then it's okay. Facebook takes a harder line. Interestingly enough, this cartoon caught our eye, the new and improved Taliban. Old Taliban on your left, the new and improved Taliban has an emoji on it. Somehow that got caught up in Facebook's anti-Taliban sniffer system. But it brings up this question, though, of how do you police something as broad as Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram for anything that the Taliban says? That seems almost an impossible task.
It was impossible years ago when a lot of it was manual. But look, we've got now artificial intelligence. We've got machine learning. We've got the ability to flag things quicker, faster, better, be able to put them in context and understand, look, there's a difference between talking about the Taliban beheading people and the Taliban saying we're going to behead people. So the algorithms are sophisticated enough to even determine context, to say what are the semantics of this. So
sometimes to people's point, sometimes they get it wrong or right, but you make a good point that it's getting better. How does this work on the other side? Because the Taliban has a vested interest in the world not seeing what's happening in Afghanistan. A lot of the images we're getting are coming from social media because journalists aren't allowed to operate freely there. So Is the cat out of the bag for the Taliban with social media access inside of Afghanistan, or are they going to be able to clamp down?
They're going to take a lesson from the Chinese. They're going to, now that the Taliban runs the country, they're also going to control the infrastructure of the country. That includes communications. That means they can now start shutting down what comes into the country and what goes out of the country. That means we will now rely upon people who will actually risk their very life to be able to find a way to get information outside, to be able to provide the videos, to provide the pictures like people do from inside North Korea or inside the Uyghur camps inside China. So you will have people do that. And Leland, the sad part about this is that social media is actually going to help them be able to deflect world opinion much better than what they did back prior to 9/11. So it's the ability is that if you tell a lie loud enough and long enough, people will start to believe it. And that's what the Taliban are going to do. They're going to continue to lie and lie and lie and use social media to reinforce that lie. And pretty soon, just enough people, it will desensitize them enough to where, well, we'll give them a chance. Like you say, it's, they're a nicer, gentler Taliban.
Yeah, we want to just point out the video that we're showing you is video from CNN where the Taliban was out beating people in the streets. Kinder, gentler Taliban probably won't put that on their social media accounts. How do these guys get so good at social media when they've been living in caves for so long?
Years ago, I was asked that kind of the same thing about Al-Qaeda. They didn't seem to be sophisticated. They learn and they adapt. If you look at the way ISIS used recruitment videos to get women and girls to come to Syria and join the fight, it's this propaganda. It's this creating this narrative that sounds sexy, that sounds like you're a freedom fighter, you're going to be doing all these great things. They've learned how to manipulate people. They've always been good at manipulating people. Social media is just another tool for them to do it. And don't kid yourself, they have people who are, and we have taken out targets from a U.S. military standpoint. They have been on the disposition matrix. We have taken out people whose only function was to do social media and to do communications because of the power. It's Joseph Goebbels reincarnated in 2021.
Well, and in this case, it goes around the world instantly. Goebbels wished he had that, but he did not. Equally dangerous in terms of what they're saying. Morgan, it's great to see you as always. We're going to have you back to talk about the Pakistan angle for this because it's an important one. We'll be right back.
You bet.
Sunrise Thursday morning in Afghanistan. We understand that a number of the planes leaving Afghanistan have been leaving empty because the Taliban isn't allowing the Americans and those trying to get the airport to get there to get out. President Biden now says, well, we'll stay till all the Americans are out. Hope that's not too long. Godspeed to our troops. Prime's next. We'll see you tomorrow.